Hey, thank you for attending the Outsmarting Common Garden Weeds and Pests IPM style. I'm Lisa Klein, and I am with UGA Extension in Gwinnett County, Georgia, Agricultural and Natural Resources Department. And this is my In the Garden virtual series. I typically host two webinars a month on Thursdays and one lunch and learn on a Tuesday, all sorts of different topics, anything you can imagine, obviously, all very scientific based. If you have topics that you are interested in, you are welcome to send me an email. My email will be at the end of the program, and you're welcome to send me an email and let me know, hey, Lisa, I'd love to hear about this. I'm always looking for new topics. Always something new, always something new. So, just some ground rules. If you have questions, go ahead and put those in the chat box as they pop up. You should be muted. I went ahead and muted everybody as you were coming in. There was a little confusion. A couple of people came in and they were not muted, so a little technicality there, but I think everybody is muted now. So please keep yourself muted. And again, if you have questions, feel free to put those in the chat box. I will get to them at the end of the presentation. So this particular presentation is going to focus on integrated pest management. So in Extension, if you know much about it, and we have folks from all over the place, different parts of Georgia. We have some folks that are tuning in. I had one person from Ghana that reached out to me that had seen my stuff on YouTube, and I would like to make it as interesting as possible with as much scientific information, good quality scientific information that isn't the first thing that you see on Google, and that you feel like you actually learned something that you can use. My goal is not to just have a boring old slide to look at, but yet something that you can refer back to, and maybe you keep a copy with you and use it in the garden if that's what it's about, or something else. You just found it interesting and you want to refer back to it. So I try to cram as much good information as I possibly can, and then obviously add comments and individual bits of information that I may personally have as I've gone through and done research for each of these webinars. So let's go ahead and get started. So this particular presentation is going to talk about integrated pest management, but it will also have some case studies, if you will. So this is one that if you are interested in having a copy of the slides just for kind of a way to see what a road in pest management out of your toolbox of IPM looks like, so that you can maybe become a more solid gardener and know how to tackle some of these disease or pest problems that have plagued you for, maybe your whole adult life. I don't know. But this will give you a good map to kind of follow, and you'll better understand integrated pest management and how to actually use it to your benefit. So what is integrated pest management? A lot of us talk about IPM, and a lot of people use bits of it. They may not realize it. They may, not even think about it and are doing parts of what we consider IPM. But really, it's the whole thing. It's the whole package. I call it my IPM toolbox. I may not use every step. I may not go through everything, but I am picking and choosing bits of the plan that will work for me. And it's going to be different for everybody. Everybody's going to have a different IPM plan. So integrated pest management, it's a bunch of decisions, evaluations, and control tactics that work for you. It could be that you're organic and you want to keep things organic. It might be that you're not. But it's going to be a lot of common sense stuff. And so as we go through, if you're new to using integrated pest management, you may see some of this here that you're already doing. But it also uses a lot of scientific based information, which is awesome. So things that we have learned over time that work and things that don't work, ways that will help the environment and make sure that we're not relying a ton on pesticides like we used to in the past. It encompasses all of those. So this is definitely something that if you are a serious gardener, whether it's ornamentals or vegetables or whatever, you definitely need to kind of come up with a map for. So a pest is going to be any organism that's going to adversely affect you. It could be your crops, your livestock. It could be anything that is considered valuable, even your house. So, you know, keep in mind that's everything in your whole environment, your whole sphere that you live in. And it's also going to use what we can call an action threshold. So when you look at your roses, for instance, in June, and you're like, why are all the leaves of my pretty roses, why do they look like stained glass? Um, well, that's a rose sawfly. And some people might be okay because they're like, "Ah, I don't have time to deal with that. I know it's not harmful. It's not going to kill my plant. I'm going to leave it." Their threshold is really high. But somebody who has awesome roses that are beautiful, maybe lives in an HOA neighborhood that requires you to have a certain look, they may not want any of that damage. So the minute that rose sawfly shows up and they see that first little tunnel in that leaf, whoo, they're out there and they're treating. Their threshold is really low. They don't want much damage. So again, for everybody, it's going to be different for each pest, for each person, for everything. So why IPM? Well, again, there's a lot of reasons why. The main one I think that really it came down to was pesticide resistance escalating. We really, in the 50s, started using pesticides way too much. It came about, IPM kind of came about, the use of pesticides really, in that we were having a hard time getting enough crops to feed everybody. Pests were becoming a real big problem. And so, pesticides, it was learned that you could use those on the crops to kill the bugs, to kill the rodents, all of that stuff. And then that led to more for us. So for a while there, all the way up through probably into the 70s or so, and even into the 80s, pesticides were just everybody, we were just using the heck out of them. And then, we started seeing stuff with like DDT and other pesticides, learning that wasn't really good for the environment. I mean, I am old enough, I'm not going to tell you how old I am, but I am old enough that I remember as a child that we would have the spray trucks come through the neighborhood spraying for mosquitoes. They didn't tell us to go inside. I mean, I was out there playing in the streets, breathing all of that stuff in. I mean, I probably have like horns in my head or something like that, but no, I don't have horns in my head. But we know now that's not a good thing. So then that started the process of, well, what can we do? How can we move away from, not say we can't use, but move away from pesticides and implement some other practices? So obviously, you've got Silent Spring there that raised a lot of public awareness. And then we had, natural enemies that started, or that of a lot of these pest species that were starting to get killed along with this pest species. So what happens when you start removing predator species along with the prey, you're unbalancing that ecosystem, and that ends up being kind of bad. So we really push the whole pollinator issue here. We really want to protect pollinators. We want to protect a lot of these natural enemies of the pests, and sometimes in cases promote them so that I mean, why do you think you can buy certain pests on Amazon or predator species for these? No guarantees that the ladybugs will stay in your garden, but you can sure buy them on Amazon. So we needed to do smarter pest control. So that started a lot of research and looking into selective treatments for particular pests, economic thresholds, things like that. So what it kind of boils down to is we have this biological, cultural, mechanical, and chemical pyramid, and I'll show you a picture of that in a second. And that's going to kind of balance that effectiveness and the sustainability in the pest control kind of triangle of how you take care of everything in your garden. Oops, went too fast. So this is the pyramid of IPM tactics. So this is a very easy infographic to look at. You've got your cultural on the bottom. That's something simple like site selection, plant selection, right plant, right place. Don't put a sun-loving plant in the shade. It's going to get all stressed out. Rotating your crops, sanitation, getting all that dead and debris and all of that stuff out in the spring before you plant. Then we move up to physical and mechanical. That might be weeding by hand. That might be putting mulch around the base and rototilling, that kind of stuff, putting up a weed barrier, like weed cloth over that. And then we move to biological, the next step up, and that's going to be your predatory insects, trying to enhance those and attract those. Parasitoid, wasps, things of that nature. Finding diseases of certain pests and using those. And then you have chemical, and those can be biorational pesticides, insect growth regulators, IGRs, repellents, microbials, and oils like neem oil. You might have horticultural oil in there. And then finally, up at the top, we have conventional pesticides. Up in that little tippy top, you're going to have your organics first and then your synthetics. Typically, that's how it is, but there are some organics that are very dangerous. So you have to be very careful about how you apply them. So please don't think that because it's an organic, it's automatically safe, because it is not. So you always want to read that label and make sure that you adhere to using the proper protective equipment, gloves, if you need to, wearing goggles, a hat, long sleeve shirt, pants. Don't go out there in your flip flops and your shorts. I don't want to see a picture of that. All right, advantages. I'm not going to go through all of these. Again, you're welcome to request a copy of these if you want to read these a little bit more. I got a lot of material, but there's lots of advantages of using IPM. Picking some of these just by doing IPM and choosing things out of this toolbox, it can boost some of these crop yields and cut the costs. And so some farmers see a 10% increase in their output at the same time, and they're spending less money. It can, reduce public health issues. We all know about the cancer hotspots. A lot of them happen in the Midwest where we have a lot of the crops. And that's because you're reducing harmful chemicals that those farmers and their workers are being around. So you're not seeing as much of that. It's going to reduce support long-term sustainability and reducing crop losses. You ultimately, it's the soil biome and keeping that healthy. If you can keep that soil biome healthy, then the crops will be healthy along with it. The soil is the basis of all. And so if you're constantly injecting or putting chemicals in there, you're disrupting the soil biome, and the plants therefore are not going to be as healthy. So you're going to have to use more pesticides or whatever to keep them and prop them up so the pests don't get them. And that's pretty much everything, like trees, ornamentals, all of that. That's why we say, put the compost in there, get that soil built up, nice organic matter, and make that soil healthy, because your plant will do so much better. So, consequences of over reliance on pesticides. Say that fast 5 times. Pests will develop resistance, and they have, to lots of different pesticides that are out there. Lots of, and I'm talking weeds, I'm talking fungal issues, I'm talking rodents. I mean, they're all pests. It's just whatever you want to call them. They're all under that umbrella of being called a pest. And a lot of the diseases that are out there in the weeds have developed resistance to some of the pesticides that we became reliant on. Over time, we've learned you've got to rotate. You can't use the same pesticide over and over and over again, because your weeds will start to go, hey, we don't care about Roundup as much. Go ahead and spray us. We're not going to die. So therefore, you want to try to use different types of pesticides to prevent that from happening, because you want to keep that. You don't want to give up all of your pesticides. You only use them judiciously and do other things to try to control whatever it is first. So a pest resurgence is going to occur when pesticides are used, if there's a large reduction in pests initially, but then you're not following up. So let's say you went on vacation for 2 weeks and you came back and you had some Mexican bean beetles in there and they're just out of control. Well, let's say that, you went ahead and treated them. They're not easy to treat at the adult stage. They're much easier to treat when they're eggs or nymphs. And now you have a whole nother generation that you have to deal with. And let's say you just got lax on that. You're like, that's hot. I don't want to go out in the garden. Next year, you'll be struggling. So there's some things that you want to do to try and not let it go down that path. There's a lot of preventative stuff in here that does better. So secondary pests, which pests that are kind of in the background, their populations might surge when you knock down that first big population of pests. They're like, woohoo, I don't have any competition. So keep that in mind. Keeping everything below that threshold is going to benefit you much more than the constant battle of playing whack-a-mole with all of these different pests. And then, of course, there's the increase in pesticide usage. You don't want to do that. And an increase in production, both in manpower and in the cost of those chemicals. So if you're a farmer, organics, whatever, that's the bottom line. That's less money for you in your pocket. And then, of course, the contamination. I mentioned that with the Midwest and other places with a lot of agriculture, when you're using a lot of pesticides, herbicides, uh, you know, for insects also, and plants, weeds, that's all going in the environment. They all have persistence, some of them less so than others, but they all stay in the environment for a period of time before they break down. So better to not have to use them or use them only when you can't deal with anything else. So failures, um, things that you don't want to do. The incorrect pesticide for the pest. Always ID the pest. There are apps for that. I'll show you some in a second. You can always reach out to Extension. We get people emailing us stuff all the time saying, can you tell us what this is? They come in the office. Can you tell us what this is? If you want to use an app and let that tell you and then just confirm with us, that's great. There are a lot of ways to do it, and it's better than just guessing. I had some folks staying at one of my houses in the mountains, and they said, oh, there was a rattlesnake by the barbecue grill. Can I see a picture? It wasn't a rattlesnake, it was a copperhead. Still venomous, but not the right snake. So bugs are the same way. It might look like it's a particular bug, but it may not be. And that bug may not respond to whatever pesticide you're trying to treat it with. Whereas if you had gotten the correct identification, it would have. So it's very important to correctly identify. Correct timing, or in this case, it says incorrect timing. It's always easier to treat either a weed or a bug in a juvenile stage, either eggs or juveniles. A lot of bugs, when they become older, they have a very hard exoskeleton. That's almost impossible to treat. There are some things that you can do, but generally speaking, much easier when it's a soft nymph. You can either squish it, that's always fun, or the eggs, you can squish those or just rip those off, or there's just less things you can do when they're an adult and they've already done their damage and they usually have already persisted and will be another generation that you'll have to deal with later. So always easier to do it when they are at a more susceptible stage. And some of that is education. You just have to know. Dose rate is too low to kill the pest. Usually we have the opposite problem. We have folks that just want to do it like 3 times the concentration because if a little bit is good, more is better. No, that's not the case. That's why we have a label rate. Always, always check the label and follow that. Don't do more, don't do less. Always go with the label rate. Incorrect application, you want to make sure you put it in the right place. If those bugs are up underneath the leaves and you're applying to the top of the leaves and it's just a contact herbicide, or not herbicide, sorry, a contact pesticide, insecticide, if it doesn't touch them, they're not going to die. Maybe, it depends. If they have to feed on it, then yes, but it'll take longer. So you want to make sure that you know where that insect lives and you treat in the correct location. You also want to make sure that you apply evenly because if you're applying down low and the pest is up high and the new green growth, it's not going to help. And pesticide resistance. So, again, you want to try to make sure that you are treating properly and you're not rotating different methods, and there are different classes, and make sure that you are doing it correctly. And if you need help with that, then by all means, definitely give us a call or an email. That's what we're here for. So some case studies, just kind of interesting, late 1800s. We have the arsenicals, compounds with arsenic. That was shown to harm bees. And this is a lot of the reason why we started doing some research and going, oh, that's not so good. Maybe we want to do something differently. 1940s, we had Paris green. Um, that harmed bees, and then chlorinated hydrocarbons, organophosphates, DDT, obviously. That harmed a lot of things. Probably the poster child was the poor bald eagle. As an aside, we actually have one that lives occasionally at the lake here at my subdivision. I never thought I'd see that in my lifetime, but we have gotten smart and done some fixing, and now we do. And then, like in the 70s, we had methylparathion and same size as pollen, and the bees took that back and it killed all the bees. Not good. And then now we have 2000s neonicotinoids, imidacloprids, and 1 year on the market, and there's documented bee kills. So we have to be real careful. We can't just jump in and go, oh, it's the next big thing, we're going to use it, and then find out later that it's decimated our pollinator population. So we got to be aware of that. So don't forget about non-pest factors: soil conditions, irrigation, water, humidity, mechanical damage, temperature, planting at correct times, planting too close together, weeds. These calls all kind of fall under the abiotic or not biological things. But there's a lot of different things that can happen and go wrong. So you want to make sure that you are taking all of these into account. So if you're fairly new to gardening, again, this is a good one right here to have a copy of that you can just refer back to. If you have disease or you think it's disease problems, this gives you a quick rundown of, no, I don't think it's the soil. Maybe it's, lack of moisture. It's been kind of dry. This is what we do when we get emails. We go through all of these and we kind of, rate it against what's going on so we can do process of elimination and try to figure out, is this a nutrient deficiency? Is this a water deficiency? What is it? Is it a disease, or is it like an environmental factor? And that's how we are the Sherlock Holmes of natural resources. So now we get to IPM, the steps in IPM. So this is the nitty gritty of it. Things that you're probably already doing, but you don't think about too much. You're like, I didn't know there was a formal process for this. Well, there is. So first, you're going to do the step one, which makes it super simple. You're going to identify whatever the pest is. You're going to take the time, either use an app for your weed. They have apps for weeds. They have apps for bugs. That even have apps for disease. And then they have us, of course, at Extension. And you're going to identify what you're dealing with, because that's going to make it easier to figure out what you need to do next. So next, step two, you're going to determine if there are enough pests that are going to be a problem. Maybe you walk out there, it's the right time of the year that you're going to start seeing squash bugs. So you start flipping leaves over, you start looking for eggs. Maybe you find a few. That happened to me. And then I went on vacation and I came back and all my squash plants are dead. I couldn't do anything about that because I was not there. But if I was here, I probably would have taken some time to flip those leaves over, maybe used some insecticidal soap if I missed some of those and had some nymphs. I might have gone in and put a little aluminum foil around the base of some of those plants just to kind of help prevent some issues. Way easier to do it at that stage than it is to try to play catch up, because now my plants are dead. I can't do anything about it, right? They don't have a pet cemetery for plants. That'd be kind of creepy though, don't you think? Anyway, so step three, you're going to set that action threshold. Maybe you're okay with your green beans having a bunch of eaten holes in the leaves as long as they're still producing green beans. For you, you're like, yeah, I don't care what the leaves look like. I just want the beans. And so you're okay. But somebody else might not want all of those holes in their leaves. And so they're out there trying to figure out what they need to do to prevent that with insecticidal soap or neem oil or something like that. And then that's all the damage they're going to tolerate. And then step four, you're going to explore treatment options. And so some of this is even before. So you're formulating a plan as you're going. So you have prevention, and that's always going to be like your best management can't talk practices. So this is where we tell you come up with a plan at the beginning of the year. If you know you've had insect problems in the past and you know roughly when they pop up and rear their ugly heads, like for instance, some pests tend to overwinter in weeds that are nearby. So make sure you cut those weeds down, get rid of them. Get them out of there so there's no place for those insects to overwinter. Maybe some of them overwinter in the top 1 or 2 inches of soil, and they tend to stay right in the immediate area of where your plants are. Well, if you're in a raised bed, you can't do much crop rotation, but you can go out there when you know it's going to be really cold and turn that soil over and expose all of those insects, the insect larvae, to the cold weather. And you can knock back your populations. People think you're crazy because it's 20 degrees and you're out there turning soil over, but next year you're not going to have as many problems. So things like that, preventative treatments, and then you have control. This is when the thresholds, monitoring, ID, and prevention methods aren't really working. That would be like me coming back from vacation, and so at that point you're like, well, heck, now I gotta pull out the big guns. So you're gonna look at and try to evaluate and come up with a plan. In my case, it was too late. I just had to rip the plants out. But maybe in your case, it's not too late. And so, step five, that's your last step. That's going to be evaluating your results. So, you can go and think, oh, look at what I did. Did this work? Do I need to adjust? I had to do this with deer. I have a problem with deer in my neighborhood. We have rather large lots. We have a lot of trees and great places for deer to hide, and they love my garden. So, finally, a couple years ago, I gave in and I bought a electric fence, and it has worked wonderfully. I just bought a solar charger and it sits inside my garden. And then I have a perimeter fence that is not electrified with just a hot wire that runs around at about chest level for deer. I lured them in with some peanut butter on some aluminum foil so that they would touch the wire with their little tongue. It zapped them, and you know what? I really haven't had a problem since because deer are territorial. So the ones that lived here near me all got a little bit of a zap and learned real quick. I guess the garden is off limits now. So I don't have any problems anymore as long as I keep that fence charged. So identifying and monitoring. Now we're going to take a little bit more of a dive into this. So here you see there's a bunch of different apps. I've got plant ID apps. I've got disease apps. I've got insect ID apps. There is an app for everything these days. So if you're not really happy with your insect identification skills and you don't consider yourself an entomologist, that's great. Don't there is an app for that. So you can see down there, there are some that are top rated. There's Seek, that's by iNaturalist, and Seek is actually pretty good at identifying both plants and insects. So weeds, ornamentals, vegetables, all of that stuff, and insects and small mammals and things. It's pretty all inclusive, and it does a fairly good job. Also, Bug ID. I used that one actually yesterday to identify an interesting moth. I was curious. I knew it was an imperial moth, but it was sitting there fluttering, and I snapped a quick picture because I was curious to see if the app would pick it up, and it did right off the bat. So very good at identifying on the fly. And then that was the picture insect and spider ID. That's by Picture This. So a lot of people have the Picture This app. It's great at identifying plants. And some people pick it up and it's a little sneaky. So if you download it and you get it, you'll get a welcome screen will pop up and it said, you can download and pay for this for $21.99 or something like that. But look up in the top right corner and you'll see a little cancel button. And you can hit cancel and then the whole thing will pop up and it works just fine. It does hide some of the information and it won't save them to a master list, but it does a great job of identifying. So you can either use a picture you've taken or you can take a picture while you're in the app. I've also used PlantNet, that's okay. And then some of the disease IDs, I've used these just, trying. It's a little subjective. Some of them want to tell you that it's a nutrient deficiency, and very obviously, I know it's not because there's other symptoms there. So I would say with the disease IDs, they still need to do a little bit of work on it, and it's way better to go ahead and just submit that to us over at Extension. We have all the specialists behind us that can help with that. That's what they do. That is their livelihood, and we can tell you whether you're dealing with a virus or whether you're dealing with insect damage or nutrient deficiency or cultural problems, that kind of thing. So, that's important. And, really, you know, I would say with this regards to the apps, I use them about half the time and I'm happy with them. They're probably better on the plant side than they are on anything else. But sometimes it's just fun and I'm always going like, let's see what this says. And then I'll go show other people, what do you think this is? And we'll compare. So AI is great and that's really changed the game in a lot of respects, but there's still a lot of work that needs to be done. Okay, so some examples. This is where, again, the slide deck can be helpful to you. So how to monitor for pests. Some people are like, well, I don't know. I'm just going to walk down there and flip some leaves over and look. Well, yes, but there's some other stuff you can do. So you can scout flipping leaves, look for damage, look for eggs or larvae, check underneath the leaves, tap those plants. Like we look for spider mites in cedar trees and some other types of trees. You tap the branch over a white piece of paper and you can dislodge small insects and see what they are. That can give you a hint that, hey, you might have some problems coming up because now we have a heat wave and we know that they like heat and they reproduce and boom, suddenly you have a population explosion. Well, you can hit them early before that happens. Trapping techniques. So sometimes you'll see the Department of Agriculture will have sticky traps up and they'll have them in trees and areas, and that's to keep an eye out for possibly invasive pests. We have the lantern fly. That thing is now pretty much anywhere in the metro area of Atlanta. So keep an eye out for it, and they would like you to, if you think you see it, squish it, take a picture of it, reach out to us, reach out to them. We need to keep eyes on where it is. If you see the egg casings, if you see the really brightly colored nymphs, squish them or use a hand vac or some way that you get rid of it. Pheromone traps. These, like Japanese beetles, they have pheromone traps, lures the males in because they think they're looking for females. We don't necessarily suggest doing that as a control method. That's more of a way to realize they're there and they might be a problem. But all you're really going to do with a pheromone trap, if you are trying to bank on those controlling the population, is lure them in from the whole neighborhood, and your neighbors will be happy with you. But your lawn will have all sorts of issues because that's where they're going to reproduce. Yay! Light traps for nocturnal insects, pitfall traps for like slugs, the whole beer trap thing. Sampling tools, use a net. You can do those over like if you've got cabbages or something and you're looking for caterpillars and the butterfly, the moths that come in and lay the eggs. You can tap or beat sheets to see if there's anything, and this is more for canopies for trees. Soil sampling for nematodes, grubs, things like that. And then there's lots of action threshold charts out there, especially if you're talking about a more agricultural crop. So there's plenty of resources out there that can help you. Analytical. diagnostic type methods, magnification tools. Everybody, if you're gone through master gardener training, you probably have a jeweler's loupe. You can look at the bugs if your eyes are deceiving you. They also have, and I don't think I have one here. I have one at the office. I was actually using it today to look at a swarming ant to make sure that it wasn't a termite, a swarming termite. So those come in really handy. It can be used with your mobile phone. It uses the Bluetooth Wi-Fi connection to connect between the little microscope and your phone. So your screen then becomes bigger and you can zoom in, and it's very helpful. Plant tissue analysis, that's used both for nutrition and for disease, lab testing for pathogens. We offer a lot of that. Record keeping and mapping, a lot of that is helpful. So if you aren't familiar, like if you work in extension, you pretty much know when the problems start to pop up. We all are pretty intuitive on all of that, but you may not be, especially if you're starting out. So keep records, get yourself a journal and get out there and write, I had horrible squash bugs at fill in the blank. So have a month to month and just start writing stuff down. The soil conditions were this, the temperatures were this, the weather was this, it rained too much, that kind of stuff. And that'll help you kind of track, and you'll see when things become a problem and when they're not. Human observation. So reports, if you're in a community garden, and you've got other folks around you, maybe you don't go there as often as some of these other folks do. They may say, oh man, I've got squash bugs really bad. So you need to be on the lookout. And there may be Facebook pages, or, you may have, I don't know. They may write it in a notebook that's in the shed or something. Every community garden kind of handles things differently. So there may be methods, or maybe your friends talk, or you get together for coffee with a friend who also gardens and you can share. And then, of course, extension, and then citizen science apps like Seek. That's what Seek does. So it'll tell you, and then there are other applications that Bugwood, that's for invasives, other insects and things. It can tell you when things have been sighted nearby that are not good for the environment. Next up, setting a threshold, the action thresholds. So I'm kind of going to breeze through this. I don't want to spend too much time. There's going to be a lot of information here. So this is, again, different for every person. That's going to be a specific pest count or a damage level that you want to keep it set at. And if it goes above that, that's where you're going to use some type of a pesticide application and to kind of mitigate any economic loss. So for you, you may not be a farmer. You're just a regular old backyard gardener, but that's fine. You don't want to lose all your tomatoes. So you need to get out there and treat with a fungicide if it's starting to get really hot and humid before the blight takes your tomatoes. So something as simple as that. This is going to be where the prevention comes in. There's a lot more here for prevention to do than it is for post-treatment. So you're going to look at like young plants. You want to kind of try to catch everything before it matures. I guess that's the key here. You don't want adult pests. You don't want adult weeds, because then they've completed their life cycle and you have a seed bed for next year. So you just have to be very on top of it. Ultimately, that's what it kind of boils down to. So types of action thresholds, they're going to be like the average number of pests per trap per week. So maybe you do have a sticky trap out that you use just so you can kind of keep on top of how many of those pests are out there. What percentage of leaves or plants are damaged during your monitoring? So you're out there looking at your green beans and you're like, oh man, last week I didn't have any damage and now I got about 30% damage. Well, that's not good. So then you start taking a bit more notice, and maybe you treat with some insecticidal soap or neem oil. Notice how I'm trying to keep the toxicity or the synthetics at a much smaller portion of what I'm thinking of doing. And then last, a number of pests dislodged during a shake sample. So you take that bowl or you take some paper out there and you shake the plant to see what comes off. And it's just a test to see what is there. Is there anything there? Is it anything there that's bad? Do I need to start planning? So, okay, so here's some action. So I am not going to go through all of this. This is where, if you're interested in just keeping this as reference material, these are a lot of different pests. And I'll actually have some IPM plans just as examples towards the back. But for instance, if you want to kind of keep an eye on your tomato hornworms, some people don't care. They're like, yeah, that's okay. It's nature. But some people don't like them. So treat if more than one worm per plant is detected. Sometimes you don't find them until they've eaten half the plant. They're pretty quick about that. But I'm of a mind, plant some extra ones. The moths, to me, they're part of nature. And if you realize hummingbird moths are actually in that family. So you don't want to kill all those. But you've got, some that are around here, some that are not, codling moths. But flea beetles, diamondback moths with cabbage, armyworms, stink bugs, leaf hoppers, wireworms, cucumber beetles, all of that. And you can see there's a recipe for how many. And this is a fairly low threshold. You may be better with more damage, but this is kind of an accepted in most of the scientific publications threshold for treatment. Garden and landscape, mostly ornamentals, lawn. So you've got aphids, whiteflies, spider mites, and the plant that they like to be on, scale, mealies, snails and slugs, just the kind of the percentage or the number of insects that you see. Trees and shrubs, grubs in your turf, Japanese beetle grubs or other types of grubs, tent caterpillars, scale on ornamentals, leaf hoppers. Some of these can get away really quick from you, and you just don't realize it until suddenly the plant goes into decline, and then you're panicking, and that's when you want to reach for the pesticide. We're trying to get better than that. That's the whole point of IPM, is you're out there scouting and you're doing a lot of actual walking around. Organics, if you do it right, falls really neatly under the umbrella of IPM because you're putting a lot more manpower into your preventative care of all of your plants to prevent pests and other damage than you are relying on the, oh no, I got to go grab the bottle and spray. Indoor and school environments, raise your hand if you've ever had pantry moths. Yeah, they're kind of gross. And then you have to go and figure out what have they infiltrated, and they get into everything. So knowing when you see one flying around at night, because that's when the males usually fly. Ants in the classroom or in your house, sugar ants, German cockroaches. Yeah, you see one, there's probably 50 of them. So the threshold on those, I would say one is very low. You want to immediately hit those hard. They reproduce very quickly. They're nasty and they're hard to get rid of. Silverfish, spiders, non-venomous, venomous house flies. Unless it's the Amityville horror house and you've got like 1,000 flies on the window. Most of us probably don't have that. Fruit flies. There are some little tricks that you can do. Red wine. Put red wine, put a little plastic wrap with a little toothpick poke so they can go in there. They love that. If you do get a banana or something else and it gets away from you because you went away for the weekend, you come back and you got all of these fruit flies, that's a good trick to know. Millipedes, beetles, moths, pantry gnats, that kind of stuff. Most people are going to be sensitive to those if they prefer a cleaner house. Some people less so. But again, it's all dependent on what you think. Prevention. This is what we really push. So, minimizing the pest pressure before it starts. You want to interrupt those life cycles and make it more difficult for them to complete their life cycle, whether it be a bug, a rodent, a weed, or any of those. Saving time, obviously, and money. It's easier to take care of things on the front end and a lot cheaper. So, let's shoot for that. Smarter, sustainable practices. You don't want to be reactive. You want to be proactive. I know it's hard. Some of us don't have much time, but you do what you can within what you have. And enhancing the effectiveness of other IPM steps. So, knowledge, that you can come by, spend some time learning how to do these kinds of things, what to look for, all the little life cycle stuff, get the reference material, show up and listen to Lisa's talks. Lots of information here. All right. Examples of preventing pests. You can see over here all the good pests, all the good bugs that go after the pests and the prey that they like. So ladybugs, they like aphids and whiteflies, chinch bugs and potato beetles. They're attracted by dill and dandelions and fern leaf. So I've done other talks about companion plants, trap plants, things like that. This is a really good little chart right here that you're looking at that kind of tells you what you can plant around that will keep those ladybugs you bought off Amazon in your garden. Plant some of these things. They'll like it and they'll stay, maybe. So garden and outdoor areas, garden hygiene, get those weeds and other things out of there that harbor pests, like I said. Rotate your crops. Some of this you're already doing, but now you know where it falls in the IPM toolbox. Soil cultivation to kill those weed seedlings, outsmarting pests, like I just said, with trap crops or intercropping, companion plants, that kind of stuff. In indoor areas, seal those cracks and gaps so that things can't get in. The ants can't get in. The roaches can't get in. The silverfish. Fix those leaky pipes and get rid of that water so you don't have mold and other pests that like that kind of stuff. Get get the trash out. Get it taken away. Declutter areas. Don't leave the old bags of birdseed in the garage for the pantry moths to populate on. Control. So these are the ways that you control. You got cultural, physical, biological, and chemical. We're just kind of going to run through those. Again, rotating pesticides, if you do have to use them, very important. And, most of this is just common sense stuff. It's here to save you money, folks. And you just have to put the manpower into it on the front end. But if you didn't and stuff got away from you, you do have this. So control methods, cultural control, crop rotation. Again, not going to read all of these, but they're here as ways that you can go in there and manually handle things that's just your time versus someone else coming in and doing it, spending some money on a chemical. All sorts of good stuff. Adjusting planting and harvest dates. It's knowledge. It's all right there for you at your fingertips. Physical and mechanical controls. Get the bug vacuum. You can get those on Amazon. It's fun, especially with leaf-footed bugs. I hate those things. Crushing, pruning, burning crop residues, tillage or soil disturbance to get rid of pests, traps, light traps, pheromone traps. This is where they all kind of fall. Barriers, all sorts of stuff. Auditory, all sorts of stuff. I mean, don't buy the mole trap that uses ultrasonics to try to scare the moles off. That doesn't really work. Air horns, they do. Visual, motion activated lights, physical barriers and devices, anti-perching things for birds, water, motion activated sprinklers. Super simple. If the dog gets squirted, it's okay. The dog might not be happy, but it doesn't hurt them. Scent based, essential oils, some, but typically it will it won't be as useful as it goes on. The smell kind of dissipates very quickly. Biological, here's where you can get the stuff off Amazon. No, I didn't provide any links, but predatory praying mantises, ladybugs, spiders, ground beetles, attract them to your garden, and then you'll have those predators there. You see there the tomato hornworm has got the predatory wasp larva. They have the eggs. They'll eat them alive. You want those to live there. Leave them if you see there because that's the next generation. You want them there, those parasitoids. Pathogens, viruses, bacteria and fungi that kill their hosts, like BT. That's a mainstream one now. Works great for fungus gnats. I got to get a little more because they're in my office. They're driving me crazy. But learn what works. There's Bavaria, You've even got some viruses that you can see there for gypsy moths and caterpillars. And there's IGRs or insect growth regulators, pheromone mating disruptors. I mean, we're getting kind of high tech there. But a lot of these biological controls, they're constantly looking at new and interesting ones, some of them more effective than others. Chemical controls. So I have to say, be careful. There's a lot of non-selective pesticides out there, some of them organics that are really deadly to pollinators, and you don't want to apply them during the day when the pollinators are out. So just be very careful and read those label destruction instructions so you don't do that. The chemical controls, you've got systemics. That's going to be absorbed into the plant tissue. It's going to circulate through the system of the plant, translocated, and then as the pest feeds on that plant, it's going to come in contact and ingest that, it'll die. Also with weeds, it's going to systemic, it's going to be absorbed into that weed and translocate down to the root system and kill the weed. Contact insecticide do just what they say. It kills on contact, disrupting the pest nervous system. So like wasp and hornet spray, thank goodness they work from 12 feet away. But yes, they're a neurological disruptor, so it'll kill the insect that way. Um, it's going to provide very rapid control, but it is a chemical, so you have to be careful. And when used correctly and very targeted, it has minimized impact on the environment, so used very judiciously. Organic versus synthetic, we talked about that a little bit. I do have some videos that are recorded where I talk about treating organic or treating nutrient deficiencies organically and organic pesticides. So you can learn a little bit more about them. And there is a lot to learn. So I know a lot of you are part of community gardens and they are organic only. That might be a good thing for you to do on a rainy day when you have nothing better, or maybe it's super hot outside and you don't want to go outside. Learn a little bit about it. It makes it much easier to understand how to do it properly so that, and if you incorporate IPM, you can be very successful at using organics. It's much more involved with manpower. Obviously, you're out there scouting and doing a lot of these things, so you can minimize the use of these chemicals, whether they be organic or synthetic. Like I said, some organics are just as deadly as some of the synthetic pesticides, but learn how to use them correctly. All right, questions to ask. So pest identification and thresholds, you want to learn what it is, learn risks to human and health. Is it a bad bug, or do we really care that it's living out there? You want to know weather conditions. Should I, or is there a drift issue? Protective equipment. Do I need to protect myself? Roundup isn't really, it is still available, but you can't go to Home Depot and Lowe's. It's been selectively removed from the homeowner market. It is still available if you know where to look for it, but it has been removed because people were not careful. If it had been properly applied with gloves and pants, and you didn't have people that were using it for 20 years in flip-flops and shorts, you wouldn't have the litigation that you have and the big payouts. So use it judiciously and be careful. Using non-chemical methods. Talking a lot here. Compliance, is it registered? Can I use it in my region? Is it a professional level or commercial level pesticide? That stuff's available out there on the internet too, but should you be using it as a homeowner? Probably not, unless you know what you're doing. And then chemical selection and impact. So you can see I've got a neat little chart here about source, persistence, that kind of stuff. Evaluating results, you want to, like I said, you want to kind of keep track. So you're going to have to measure the effectiveness at the end of the year. Make some adjustments. That's why you have a garden journal, maybe. Protecting the environment is tops for everything. Improving your costs. I mean, maybe you don't have a whole lot of money and you want to grow food for your family. Well, there are ways to do that where you don't have to rely on a lot of store-bought stuff. So it just means you're going to have to do more research and figure out how to do that and learning. That's basically it in a nutshell. All right, so I'm not going to really talk much about these. These are the sample plans, the sample IPM plans. So I did a handful for some of the typical garden pests that you might be dealing with. This is squash bugs. And this kind of gives a formal IPM plan for squash bugs. Is this what you do? I don't know. This is very formal. Some people might be very formal. I am not. But again, you can request the slide deck and you'll have that, and then you can kind of go through. This one's for leaf-footed bugs, and it's, plant trap crops, sunflowers. I can vouch for that. They love sunflowers and they will go over there. But it works just as well for you to find their eggs and squish them first. Cucumber beetles, how to identify them, rotate your crops to disrupt the beetles' life cycles. They like to live in and around on the soil. Move that plant debris, disrupt the larvae and the adults that overwinter. Japanese beetles, yeah, we all hate those. So, look here, proper watering. I can tell you exactly when they start to become a problem, usually in a hot, dry period, and when you should be treating for them too, especially if you've got problems with animals, armadillos or skunks or other things digging up your lawn. It may make sense to put a grub treatment down because a lot of times that's what they're looking for. They're looking for those grubs that are moving back up, getting ready to pupate in the end of May into June. Fire ants, we all hate them. So yes, you can treat them organically. Um, Spinosad is the choice treatment. Don't pour gasoline and torch their hills. Don't mow over the top. I know it feels good, but that's not the best thing to do. Personally, I use Amdro. It's a bait, and just the simple formulation that you put it there and they carry it down to eat it and it kills the queen. I'm fine with the fact that that is not an organic. It does a very good job, and I don't have to worry about pollinators. Crabgrass, we all hate it, and I got a lot of it down there in my garden. I'm probably going to have to hit the Roundup to control some of it. It got a little bit away from me when I was on vacation. So controlling it, in my case, I just usually choose to either um, use some type of a string trimmer to trim back so there's no seed heads. It's an annual, but you have a seed bed. Pre-emergents are a good thing here. Again, with organics, I know sometimes people or like preen. I don't have as much good luck with preen. I have just used other types of synthetics that are available but are pre-emergent that form a nice barrier in the soil when watered in and will prevent that plant from growing past the germination stage. To me, it's well worth the money and the annoyance of having to go down there in the heat and pull weeds. I hate that. But there's a plan here for you. If you want to learn a little bit more, Virginia's Cooperative Extension Office, I've got a QR code there that you can learn more about. Chamber bitter, we did have a guy come in today. He had a rather healthy plant. I've heard that some people think these plants are basically born pregnant. And that's not too far from the truth because their seed is viable once they reach about 2 inches tall, which that's not very tall. So you have to get them out of your garden or your yard because they will multiply, and then soon you will have an entire little patch of mimosa weed. And it's hard to kill post-emergent. Once it's up, it's hard to kill it. It's very resistant. So it's better to do it, either remove it by hand or use a pre-emergent. And you can read a little bit more about it there at the Clemson Cooperative Extension. And here's your IPM plan. Personally, I just pull them. It's satisfying. And that's it. So I did kind of zoom through, like I said, a lot of what I had there is what I would consider worthy of just requesting the slide deck so you can use it as reference material. This, pretty in depth. There's a lot of information there and a lot of good stuff that you might want to keep for later. So let's see if there's any questions. A topic I'm interested in is preventing deer damage. Yes, I have given several webinars on urban wildlife damage and how to, and specifically one on managing deer. I believe it is on the YouTube channel, which you should have the QR code that will take you there. Metro Master Gardener YouTube channel. So there should be the recorded presentation on deer damage and how to prevent it there if you would like to check that out. I do recycle these periodically, so it may pop up again in the future. But if you want to watch it now, it should be up there. Interested in best how to tackle aggressive Bermuda grass creeping into planting beds and how to tackle Carolina horse nettle, devil's tomato. Manual removal is difficult and I don't use pesticides. So, Bermuda grass, there are some pesticides that I know you said you don't use them. I personally, to control it, use something that is best for monocots, for basically grasses at removing, and it doesn't hurt ornamentals or vegetables or anything like that. Um, and I found it works really well at killing Bermuda grass. Bermuda, you just have to kind of be persistent at. So the best thing, if you don't want to use pesticides, is you can either use a barrier method between a planting bed, like a raised bed where you're growing vegetables. Use something like heavy cardboard or landscape fabric or something else, and you have to put a barrier, and then you're going to have to use a string trimmer, come through and trim along whatever barrier you have. You can use horticulture vinegar, but if you're growing something else there, know that it's changing the pH in the soil drastically. And if you remember what I said about the soil biome, plants live in a very narrow pH range. Most of them like it to be about 6.2 to 6.8. That's almost neutral at 7. And if you use a really something like 70% horticultural vinegar, that's a strong acid. That's going to drop your pH way down below 5, and that plant is not going to be able to use the nutrients that it needs. It won't be able to access calcium. It won't be able to get any magnesium because the pH makes it unavailable, not bioavailable. So be very careful when you're using things like that, which sounds organic and great. It's better used on a flagstone patio where you don't want anything to grow than it is to be used around the beds of raised beds where you're growing vegetables or something else. You're better off if you're trying to grow ornamentals, is you're just going to have to use elbow grease, hand pull the stuff, use physical barriers. Again, those all fall under in your IPM, physical barriers and things like that to prevent it from growing. You can try solarizing, that's another one. Putting the barrier down and allowing the heat of the sun to bake the roots and hopefully kill off some of that. I've seen it be successful. I've also seen people just give up. So you have to just be persistent. Let's see. Is there any netting I can use for my blueberries that won't kill birds? Um, yeah, you have to use a much smaller, uh, I would almost say mosquito netting. We recently did a road trip and traveled up to Maine, and I saw a lot of people who had blueberries that were actually using mosquito netting. So, mosquito netting, in some cases, people were even taking chicken wire and they were taking it and kind of laying it down at the base of the bush, and then they would have the bird netting over the top and have it pulled tight to, I mean, that's some serious stuff. I personally just plant some more bushes and let the birds eat it because it's a lot of effort to go through. But if you only have a couple bushes, you may want to do that. Some people have gone so far as to just use some lumber and build a cube over the top of it and put just screen netting like you would use on a screen porch. It's kind of up to you. But the smaller the the diameter of the square that you use, the harder it's going to be for a bird to get all tangled up in it and then, get killed. So if you want a copy of the slide deck, my email address is right here. So take that down and please go ahead and email me at your leisure that you would like a copy and just put the in the subject line, put the title of the talk. Unfortunately, because people come from all different places here, some have registered, some have not. I don't know who everybody is here, so I can't guarantee that I would know to send it to you. So if you want a copy, use my email and just go ahead and I'll type it here too. And you can reach out to me there. And plus, I'm getting ready for a Master Gardener advanced training next week. I will have no time to just hunt everybody down and send those. So, yes, if you would like a copy, go ahead and just email me and I will get it to you when I get an opportunity. Let's see. Any other questions? Spruce instead of Roundup. So I don't know what the active ingredient is in spruce. I would have to look it up. There's the replacement for Roundup for glyphosate is a combination of chemicals that were already on the market. So if you go buy Roundup in the store right now, it's going to still say Roundup, but it's not going to have glyphosate in it. It's going to be a couple different chemicals that combined work very similarly to Roundup. Roundup's a non-selective systemic herbicide, so it works similarly. We always look at the active ingredient of whatever that pesticide is. That tells us what that will be targeted to. So if, for instance, if you brought a weed in for us to look at or sent me a picture, I would identify what it is. And then if it's in your lawn, I would go through. I have a special little book that they put out every year that tells us what chemicals are still available, what chemicals are not available, what works for this particular plant, and killing it, and the effectiveness, the active ingredient. And so I have to go through all of that and figure all of that out. And then I would tell you, you can use this chemical. It's considered an excellent chemical to use on post-emergent or pre-emergent, whichever. But always know pre-emergent for weeds anyway is a way better way of going. Let's see. Thank you. Yeah, tips on controlling greenbrier without using Roundup. So greenbrier has a very waxy coating on its leaf. You need some type of a surfactant to kind of break through that waxy coating. So the same way you have like with English ivy, sometimes you have to use a pesticide. You can use goats, but most of us don't have that option for us, and large amounts of English ivy can be toxic. Greenbrier, not so much. If it's a large stand, I, would say cut it off towards the base, dig out the tuber. Usually they're going to be rather large. They're white, very fibrous. If you can get that tuber out, that's they don't grow too deep. I would say probably 6 inches. So if you can follow that vine back down to the ground, dig the tuber out. That's going to be your best bet if you don't want to use any type of a pesticide. If you are okay, you can use a brush killer, and there are different application tools. You can also make your own. Get a cheap sponge from the dollar store, cut a slice of it, put it around the end of the nozzle with a rubber band, and use that to paint the leaves. That way you don't have overspray. You don't have to worry about drift. Um, it's a lot easier and you don't have to worry as much. I do that myself, especially for things like that. Or if you've got like wisteria or something growing in amongst other plants, that works really well. Otherwise, it's just elbow grease. You're going to have to root it out, dig it out. And sometimes you don't get all of the roots and it may come back, but it's a persistence thing. If you don't want to use pesticides, there aren't very many choices. You can't use the hort vinegar because, like I said, it changes the pH in the soil. That's more for a ground kill situation where you don't want anything to grow there. So you just have to be very careful. All right, let's see. Any other questions before I call it for the night? And again, if you want the slide deck, please email me. I do see all your emails there, and it would just be very helpful for me if you just emailed me and I can send it to you directly. It may not be until next week after I get the presentation done for Wednesday. It's going to be a very busy week, but yeah. So, okay. Well, thank you all for attending. I appreciate that you took the time to come here and hopefully you learned something. And again, there's a lot of reference material in this particular presentation. So there is a lot of stuff here that I'm sure you probably would use at some point in the future if you're a serious gardener. So till next time, have a good evening, and I hope you enjoy the rest of the week. Thank you.